An unexpected challenge was about to be presented to St. Mary's General Hospital, a beacon of medical excellence in an affluent suburban community. Angela Parker, a gifted black nurse, was unaware of the profound prejudices she would face upon joining their staff. A seemingly ordinary patient named Thomas Edwards observed discreetly from his hospital bed as tensions increased and conflicts escalated. However, Mr. Edwards was not a typical patient, and his presence was about to revolutionize everything. What concealed abilities did this enigmatic patient possess? Additionally, how could the struggle of a single nurse serve as the impetus for institutional transformation? Let us investigate. However, before we delve into this narrative, please leave a comment below indicating the location from which you are viewing it today. Additionally, please remember to subscribe if you find this narrative to be engaging, as it contains unexpected twists and moments of justice. The fluorescent lights illuminated the immaculate corridors of St. Mary's General Hospital as Angela Parker made her initial entrance. The air was dense with the aroma of disinfectant, and an underlying current of tension caused her stomach to churn. Angela, despite her anxiety, sat up erect and raised her chin, resolute in her intention to establish a positive first impression. Angela observed the abrupt silence that enveloped the nurse's station as she approached it. Eyes averted from her, as if apprehensive to establish eye contact, and conversations diminished to murmurs. She swallowed forcefully, attempting to suppress the recurring sensation of isolation that was on the brink of engulfing her. Despite her anxiety, Angela maintained her composure and said, "Excuse me, I am the new nurse, Angela Parker. Would you be able to guide me to the office of the chief nurse?" The blue eyes of a blonde nurse slightly widened as she glanced up, and a practiced smile spread across her face. She responded with a courteous but composed tone, "Of course. Down the hall, the third entryway on the right." Acutely aware of the eyes following her progress, Angela nodded her gratitude and made her way down the corridor. The silence was punctuated by the click of her sensible shoes, and each step felt like a thunderclap in the unnaturally silent space. A tall, distinguished-looking man in a white coat emerged from an adjacent room as she approached the office. He was identified as a senior doctor by his authoritative demeanor and salt-and-pepper hair. Angela's pulse beat faster with anticipation. Perhaps this would be her opportunity to establish a positive rapport. "Good morning, Doctor," she greeted with a friendly smile. "I am Angela Parker, the new nurse who will be on duty today. I am delighted to have the opportunity to meet you." The doctor's expression was impassive as his steel-gray eyes glanced over her. "Doctor," he curtly replied, "William Gaves. I am confident that you have been adequately informed of our protocols." Dr. Gaves continued, "We uphold exceptionally high standards at St. Mary's." Even before Angela could respond, "I trust that you are adequately equipped to confront them." Angela stood alone in the hallway, her outstretched hand slowly lowering to her side, as he brushed past her without waiting for a reply. Angela was left feeling dejected by the interaction, however she refused to allow it to lower her spirits. She exhaled deeply, stooped and knocked on the door of the chief nurse. Angela's thoughts returned to her time in nursing school as she awaited a response, her mother's words reverberating in her ears. "Baby girl," her mother had said, her voice infused with a blend of pride and apprehension, "you will be required to exert twice the effort as the rest of the group. However, refrain from allowing them to observe you perspiration. You are the product of a long line of resilient women, and you possess that same fortitude." Angela recalled the late-night studying, the additional hours in the laboratory, and the perpetual sense of needing to prove herself. She recalled the subtle dismissals from certain instructors, the raised eyebrows when she acquitted an exam, and the whispered comments from classmates who questioned her genuine belongingfulness. However, Angela maintained her resolve throughout. Even her most fervent detractors were silenced by her determination and talent as she graduated at the top of her class. Angela now drew fortitude from those memories as she stood in the halls of St. Mary's ES. She had previously surmounted challenges, and she would do so once more. The door was opened, revealing a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "I assume you are Miss Parker." Her tone was abruptly cut. "I invite you to enter. We have a significant amount of material to discuss, and I anticipate that you will remain engaged." Angela was unable to escape the sensation that she was entering more than a new job as she followed the head nurse into the office. A silent tempest was brewing beneath the surface of professional smiles and sterile efficiency, as the air in the hospital seemed charged with an undercurrent of tension. Angela was unaware that her presence would soon serve as the catalyst for change in the hallways of St. Mary's, revealing the toxic culture that was concealed beneath its prestigious exterior and challenging long-standing prejudices. The remainder of Angela's initial day was consumed by a deluge of documentation, orientations, and introductions. She was unable to ignore the nuanced manners in which she was excluded as she traversed the hospital. As she approached, conversations would come to a complete halt, only to resume in a whisper once she had passed. She was left feeling like an outsider in a collaborative environment that was supposed to be welcoming, as her attempts at small talk with her fellow nurses were greeted with polite but distant responses. Angela was mentally and emotionally fatigued by the conclusion of her shift. While retrieving her belongings from her locker, she could hear two nurses conversing in a low voice in the vicinity. "Did you observe the new employee?" one whispered. "Yes, I am uncertain as to their intentions," the other individual responded. "This is not the ideal location for you know." Angela's pulse plummeted as her hand froze on the door of her locker. She had anticipated that the initial chilliness was merely a result of the nerves she experienced on her first day. However, the actuality of her circumstances was now becoming painfully apparent. This was not merely a new position, it would be a daily struggle against preconceived notions and prejudice. The burden of the day weighed heavily on her shoulders as she exited the hospital. Angela proceeded to the bus stop, her mind awash in a flurry of emotions. The excitement she had experienced that morning had been supplanted by a persistent sense of isolation and uncertainty. Angela retrieved her phone and contacted a number that was well known to her while seated on the unyielding plastic bench. A warm, comforting voice answered after 2 rings. "Hello, little girl. What was the nature of your initial day?" Angela experienced tears forming at the corners of her eyes upon hearing her mother's voice. She forced a shaky breath, resolute not to collapse in public. "It was difficult, Mama," she stated, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Her mother spoke again, her voice brimming with fortitude and comprehension, after a brief period of silence on the other end of the line. "Angela Marie Parker, you must listen to me. You have exerted an immense amount of effort to permit anyone to diminish your worth. Recall your identity and your origins. You are not merely present for your own benefit. You are also present for every young black girl who aspires to one day walk those corridors." Angela closed her eyes, allowing her mother's words to permeate her. "I am aware, Mama. I simply did not anticipate that it would be this challenging." Her mother responded, "Nothing worthwhile is ever effortless, my child. However, you have the support of generations to your back. Remain composed, perform your duties with greater proficiency than any other individual, and refrain from demonstrating any signs of weakness. Can you hear me?" Angela responded with a newfound sense of resolve. "Yes, Mama, I heed your statement." Angela observed an elegant black Mercedes slow down as it passed the bus stop as she concluded the call. She caught a glimpse of Dr. Greaves through the tinted windows. He fixed his gaze on her for a brief period before the vehicle speeded away. Angela's mother's words reverberated in her mind as she squared her shoulders. She was not alone despite the fact that she was confronting an uphill battle. Angela was confident that she could overcome any obstacles that St. Mary's presented as she had the support of her family and was determined to prove herself. Angela stood, prepared to confront another day as the bus approached. She was unaware that her arrival at St. Mary's would initiate a sequence of events that would challenge the hospital's culture at its core, revealing long-concealed prejudices and necessitating a long-overdue reckoning. The subsequent weeks at St. Mary's General Hospital unfurled like a slow-burning fuse, with each day adding an additional layer of tension to the already challenging work environment that Angela Parker was faced with. The initial reluctance she had felt on her first day had transformed into a more subtle form of exclusion, one that was more difficult to identify but impossible to disregard. Angela was unable to ignore the striking contrast in treatment she received from her white colleagues as she made her morning rounds. Dr. William Greaves, in particular, appeared to derive a perverse satisfaction from criticizing her work regardless of the extent to which she fulfilled her responsibilities. One morning, Dr. Greaves yelled out, "Nurse Parker," his voice echoing throughout the bustling nurses' station. "I trust that you have familiarized yourself with our protocols thus far. We are unable to tolerate any errors." Angela's spine was chilled by the emphasis he placed on the word mistakes. She maintained a steady gaze, refusing to yield to his intimidation. "Certainly, Dr. Greaves. I can guarantee that I am well versed in all hospital procedures." A smirk played at the corners of Dr. Greaves' mouth as he raised an eyebrow. "We will investigate that matter, won't we? I trust that you have acquired all the necessary knowledge from this experience." Angela and the other nurses were not unaware of the scarcely concealed condescension in his tone, as they pretended to be engaged in their duties while evidently listening in. Angela could sense the pressure of unspoken judgments pressing down on her as Dr. Greaves walked away. Angela was assigned the most difficult and unfavorable duties throughout the day, while her white colleagues were assigned cases that were relatively straightforward. Angela was frequently assigned to manage the most intricate procedures and challenging patients. "Angela, would you be willing to accommodate Mr. Johnson in room 305? The voice of a colleague nurse was sickly sweet as she inquired. "He has been somewhat difficult to deal with today." Angela nodded, aware that the term challenging was an understatement. Mr. Johnson was notorious for his prejudiced outbursts and had already caused 2 nurses to cry that week. Nevertheless, Angela approached the task with a steadfast sense of professionalism, determined to demonstrate her value. As she entered Mr. Johnson's room, Angela couldn't help but question if this assignment was simply another attempt to test her resolve, or worse, to set her up for failure. She was bracing herself for the inevitable tirade. "What are you doing here?" As soon as he encountered her, Mr. Johnson spat. "I informed them that I do not wish to have any nurse of any race touch me." The onslaught of hateful words was met with a deep intake as Angela prepared herself. "Mr. Johnson, I am present to assess your vital signs and modify your dressing. I guarantee that I am exceedingly well equipped to administer your treatment." Angela maintained her composure, despite the constant barrage of ethnic slurs and insults she encountered while working. She executed her assignments with precision and diligence, refusing to allow Mr. Johnson's prejudice to undermine the quality of her work. Dr. Greaves was waiting in the hallway when Angela eventually emerged from the room, his expression betraying a sense of feigned concern. "Nurse Parker, is everything in order? We were informed of a significant disturbance." Angela maintained an even gaze toward him. "Mr. Johnson's vital signs are consistent, and his garment has been replaced. Dr. Greaves, is there anything else you require from me?" After a brief moment of astonishment, the doctor's expression was swiftly replaced by his customary expression of condescension. "I trust that you will be able to maintain that level of composure with all of your patients. We would prefer to avoid any complaints at this time, wouldn't we?" Angela was unable to escape the sensation that she had just passed a test that she should never have been subjected to as Dr. Greaves walked away. The remainder of Angela's shift was characterized by a flurry of interminable responsibilities and covert infractions. She was compelled to repeatedly verify her work, not because she questioned her capabilities, but because she was aware that even the slightest error would be magnified and exploited against her. Angela was unable to ignore the fact that her white colleagues appeared to effortlessly complete their shifts, engaging in conversation and laughter, while she was burdened by her disproportionate caseload as the day progressed. The disparity was evident. However, the memory of her mother's words prevented her from speaking up every time she contemplated doing so. "Do not allow them to observe you stumble." Angela was emotionally and physically exhausted by the conclusion of her shift. She overheard 2 nurses conversing in the vicinity as she collected her belongings from her locker. "Is it possible that they are making such a significant fuss about diversity hires?" one of them stated, her voice reeking of contempt. "They are unable to keep pace with the rest of us in any case." Angela's pulse was pounding in her chest as her hand froze on the door of her locker. She desired nothing more than to confront them in order to defend herself and her capabilities. However, she was aware that any such confrontation would only serve to bolster their preconceived notions. Rather, she discreetly closed her locker and exited the hospital, maintaining a high profile despite the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. The same sleek black Mercedes that Angela had previously observed drew up alongside her as she waited at the bus stop. Dr. Greaves was revealed to be at the helm as the window descended. He cried out, "Nurse Parker," his voice dripping with false concern. "Waiting for the bus once more. What a pity. It appears that this is the most you can afford on a nurse's salary, is it?" Angela was left standing in a state of humiliation and anger as Dr. Greaves raced away before she could respond. The casual cruelty of his words struck her deeply, reminding her of the daily uphill battle she encountered at St. Mary. Angela's emotions were a tumult as she ascended the bus. The exhilaration and optimism she experienced upon her arrival at St. Mary's now seemed like a distant memory, having been replaced by a grim determination to endure in this hostile environment. However, a small voice in the back of her consciousness whispered that something had to give as she grappled with the day's events. The inquiry was whether she would be the one to succumb to the relentless pressure. Alternatively, would her unwavering determination ultimately result in a transformation of the noxious culture at St. Mary's? Angela was unaware that an unexpected ally was about to enter her life, one who would assist in tipping the scales in her favor and revealing the deep-seated prejudices that had long been smoldering within the walls of St. Mary's General Hospital. Angela closed her eyes as the bus rumbled through the darkening streets, drawing strength from the memory of her mother's words and the legacy of resilience that ran through her bloodstream. She was resolute in her resolve to confront the challenges that awaited her tomorrow, including another conflict. Angela arrived at St. Mary's the following morning with a re-energized sense of purpose. She had spent the night contemplating her experiences and reminding herself of the reason she became a nurse in the first place: to assist individuals, irrespective of their origin or her own obstacles. Angela observed a flurry of activity as she proceeded to the nurses' station. Nurses were in a hurry to prepare a room, and she sensed a sense of anticipation that she had never experienced before. Angela inquired of one of her colleagues, "What is the matter?" inquiring about the disturbance. The nurse, temporarily losing her usual demeanor toward Angela, responded with enthusiasm, "We have a VIP patient arriving, a prominent figure who was involved in a skiing accident. According to my sources, both of his arms were fractured." Angela was unable to query further as Dr. Greaves appeared, his face fixed in a stern expression. "Nurse Parker," he said, his voice trembling, "I require your assistance in managing the new admission in room 412, Mr. Thomas Edwards. He has sustained severe injuries in a skiing accident, resulting in the fracture of both of his arms. I anticipate that you will give him the utmost care and attention." Angela acknowledged the assignment as yet another examination, nodding in agreement. "Certainly, Dr. Greaves. I will address the matter immediately." Angela was unable to escape the sensation that this assignment was somehow unique as she made her way to room 412. The patient's aura of significance caused her to contemplate whether there was more to the situation than initially appeared.
Upon entering the room, Angela was met by the sight of a middle-aged male that was lying in bed, with both arms encased in casts. Angela immediately recognized the quiet authority that emanated from him, despite his injuries. "Good morning, Mr. Edwards," she said, approaching the bed with a pleasant smile. "I am Nurse Angela Parker, and I will be responsible for your care during your time with us." Mr. Edwards gazed upward at her, his eyes alight with scrutiny. "Good morning, Nurse Parker," he responded, his voice surprisingly robust in comparison to his condition. "I am grateful for your assistance. I must admit that I did not anticipate finding myself in this situation following my skiing accident." Angela was unable to ignore the fact that Mr. Edwards was closely observing her every move as she began to evaluate his condition and check his vitals. In contrast to some of the other patients she had encountered, his gaze was devoid of any indication of prejudice or contempt. Rather, it was characterized by a thoughtful inquiry. "You appear to be quite proficient, Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards observed as she adjusted his IV. "For how long have you been employed at St. Mary's Es?" Angela was taken aback by the sincere interest in his demeanor. She replied with precision, "I have been present for several weeks, sir. It has been an interesting experience thus far." Her diplomatic response caused Mr. Edwards to raise an eyebrow. "I see," he replied, his tone suggesting a sense of amusement. "And how have you found the hospital? Have you found it to be worthy of its prestigious reputation, I trust?" Angela hesitated, uncertain about how to respond. The advent of Dr. Greaves, who burst into the room with an overly cheerful demeanor that Angela had never seen before, preserved her from responding. Dr. Greaves' voice was dripping with artificial warmth as he exclaimed, "Mr. Edwards, I am confident that Nurse Parker has been providing you with the highest quality of care. Our most distinguished patients are assigned the most qualified staff." Angela endeavored to maintain a neutral demeanor, as she was acutely aware that Dr. Greaves had never previously demonstrated such confidence in her capabilities. Nevertheless, Mr. Edwards appeared to recognize the inconsistency. "Yes, Dr. Greaves," he replied, his gaze alternating between the doctor and Angela. "I was just inquiring about Nurse Parker's experiences at St. Mary's Es. She has been exemplary." Dr. Greaves' smile briefly wavered before it was swiftly restored. "I am confident that she will inform you that it has been nothing short of exceptional. At St. Mary's Es, we take great pride in our inclusive and supportive environment." Angela maintained her professional demeanor, despite feeling a surge of fury at Dr. Greaves' blatant hypocrisy. Nevertheless, Mr. Edwards appeared to perceive the tension that was present. "Is that accurate?" he pondered, his gaze never departing Angela's. "I am eager to personally experience this supportive environment during my visit." Angela was unable to escape the sensation that she had just witnessed something significant as Dr. Greaves launched into a detailed explanation of Mr. Edwards' treatment plan. The pointed nature of Mr. Edwards' inquiries and the way he had looked at her suggested that he was able to see beyond the polished facade of St. Mary. Angela discovered that she spent more time in Mr. Edwards' room than with any other patient over the course of the next few days. He was vigilant and engaging, frequently inquiring about her work and background, despite his injuries. Edwards, in contrast to the majority of the other patients and staff, appeared to be sincerely interested in her responses, never exhibiting any indication of the prejudice she had come to anticipate. One afternoon, while Angela was changing Mr. Edwards' dressings, she overheard a conversation outside the room that caused her to feel nauseous. A nurse's voice whispered, "I am indifferent to Dr. Greaves' opinion. I have no confidence in the Parker woman's ability to care for our VIP patient. Who knows what she may do?" Another voice concurred, "I understand, however, we are unable to make any statements. They will simply accuse us of being prejudiced." Angela's hands trembled slightly as she completed her task, the weight of the incessant suspicion and mistrust pressing down on her. Mr. Edwards, who was perpetually vigilant, observed her anguish. "Nurse Parker, is everything in order?" he inquired with a gentle yet inquisitive tone. Angela attempted to smile forcefully. "Certainly, Mr. Edwards. My primary focus is on ensuring that these bandages are precisely executed." For a brief period, Mr. Edwards maintained his silence, his gaze fixed on her visage. "You know," he ultimately stated, "I have always maintained that an individual's genuine character is not revealed by their treatment of their superiors, but rather by their treatment of those they consider inferior." The pointed nature of his comment caught Angela off guard, and she glanced up in surprise. A knowing expression was present in Mr. Edwards' irises as he maintained her gaze. "I have witnessed a great deal in my lifetime, Nurse Parker, and I can attest that the view from this bed has been enlightening." Prior to Angela's response, Dr. Greaves entered the room, ending their dialogue. Angela was unable to escape the sensation that Mr. Edwards was more than a mere VIP patient as she exited the room. His words and actions suggested a more profound comprehension of the dynamics at work in St. Mary's, and Angela experienced a glimmer of hope for the first time since she began working there. She was unaware that Mr. Edwards's arrival was about to initiate a sequence of events that would shook the very foundations of St. Mary's General Hospital, revealing the deep-seated prejudices that had long persisted beneath its immaculate exterior. Angela became increasingly isolated at St. Mary's as the days progressed. The initial coolness from her colleagues had transformed into blatant hostility, as she was followed by whispered comments and pointed glares wherever she went. Dr. Greaves became more overt in his attempts to undermine her, emboldened by the lack of consequences for his behavior. Dr. Greaves approached Angela with a stack of files one morning as she was examining patient charts at the nurse's station. "Nurse Parker," he stated, his voice flowing with false concern, "I require your assistance in managing these cases today. They present a particularly difficult challenge. I am confident that you are capable of completing the assignment." Angela glanced at the pile and immediately recognized that it was nearly double the burden of her colleagues. She maintained a steady gaze toward Dr. Greaves, refusing to exhibit any indication of intimidation. "Certainly, Dr. Greaves, I will promptly address the matter." Angela heard Dr. Greaves whisper under his breath, "Let's see how she handles this," as he walked away, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Angela found herself rushing from one challenging case to another, scarcely having time to catch her breath, throughout the day. Many of the patients she was assigned to had complex medical requirements or challenging personalities, and they were among the most demanding in the hospital. Angela maintained her standards despite the excessive burden. Despite the onset of exhaustion, she maintained a consistent level of professionalism and concern with each patient. Nevertheless, the consistent pressure was having a detrimental effect on both the physical and emotional well-being of the individual. Angela overheard two of her colleagues conversing in the vicinity as she hurried to respond to yet another call light. Is it possible that they are permitting her to manage all of these critical cases? One nurse spoke with a tone of contempt. It appears as though they are anticipating her error. I am aware, the other individual replied, but you must acknowledge that her perseverance is remarkable. I would have shattered by this point. Angela experienced a combination of indignation and sadness that enveloped her. The realization that her colleagues were not only cognizant of the unjust treatment, but were also actively monitoring her to determine whether she would succeed was nearly unbearable. Angela discovered that she was making more frequent visits to Mr. Edwards's room as the day progressed. In contrast to the rest of the hospital, his room had become a sort of sanctuary for her, a place where she could regain her composure and experience, if only for a moment, the realization that someone recognized her true worth. "Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards greeted her as she entered his room for a routine check. "You appear to be fatigued. Is everything in order?" A feeble smile was all that Angela could muster. "Mr. Edwards, today has been quite hectic." "There is nothing that I am unable to manage, Mr. Edwards' eyes were filled with concern as he briefly examined her features. "You are aware," he said with precision, "that there is a distinction between managing an issue and thriving. I have observed that you are more than competent of the latter." Although his words were kind, they only served to emphasize the stark contrast between the manner in which Mr. Edwards treated her and the behavior of the other hospital personnel. The weight of her isolation threatened to overwhelm Angela, as she felt a lump form in her larynx. "I am grateful, Mr. Edwards," she managed to say, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "I am grateful for your generosity." Mr. Edwards addressed her as she prepared to depart. He addressed her as Nurse Parker, and his voice was tinged with a subtle authority that caused her to pause. "Keep in mind that the most significant strength is often the ability to recognize when it is time to speak up." Angela exited the room, her mind reeling from the implications of Mr. Edwards' statements. She could not escape the sensation that something was about to change as she made her way back to the nurse's station. She was unaware that the following day would bring a sequence of events that would test her to the brink and necessitate a confrontation that had been simmering since her first day at St. Mary's. The hospital was in a state of heightened activity when Angela arrived at work the following morning. Several hospital board members and significant visitors were anticipated to observe a high-stakes emergency operation that was scheduled for later that day, and rumors were circulating. Angela was unable to ignore the apprehensive energy that permeated the hospital as she began her rounds. The anticipated operation appeared to be a significant source of anxiety for both nurses and physicians, as they appeared to be on edge. Dr. Greaves approached Angela in the middle of her morning responsibilities, and his gleam in his eye immediately set her on edge. "We require your assistance in the emergency operation this afternoon, Nurse Parker," he stated, making sure to maintain a neutral tone. "It is a critical situation. I am confident that you are adequately equipped to manage the situation." A combination of disbelief and suspicion washed over Angela. She was typically honored to be asked to participate in a high-profile operation, However, she couldn't help but question whether there was an ulterior motive when it was from Dr. Greaves. "Certainly, Dr. Greaves," she replied, maintaining a steady tone. "I will be prepared." Angela overheard Dr. Greaves murmur to another doctor as he departed, "Let's observe how she manages the pressure. This ought to be intriguing." The hours preceding the operation were characterized by a flurry of anticipation and preparation. Angela immersed herself in her work, conducting extensive double and triple checks to guarantee that she was adequately equipped to confront any obstacles that may arise during the operation. Angela could not help but observe the skeptical expressions of certain staff members as she scrubbed in for the surgery. She exhaled deeply, bracing herself for the impending events. "Don't you dare allow them to witness your weakness," her mother's words reverberated in her mind. The operation commenced, and Angela was assigned to collaborate with Dr. Greaves and several other senior staff members. The tension in the room was palpable, as the knowledge that significant observers were monitoring their every move added an additional layer of pressure. Angela's movements were precise and efficient, and she maintained her focus in spite of the difficult circumstances. She foresaw the surgeon's requirements and provided them with instruments without their request, demonstrating her extensive training and experience. Nevertheless, Angela observed a development that caused her pulse to race as the operation progressed. Dr. Greaves, who is typically so confident and certain, appeared to be hesitant. As he prepared to perform a critical incision, his hands shivered slightly. At that instant, Angela recognized that Dr. Greaves was on the brink of committing an error that could have had fatal consequences. She spoke without hesitation. "Dr. Greaves," she said, her voice clear and steady, "it may be worth considering an alternative approach. The patient's anatomy indicates that it may be safer." All gazes were directed toward Angela as the room fell silent. Dr. Greaves gazed at her, his expression a combination of astonishment and anger. For a brief moment, Angela entertained the possibility that he might reject her proposal explicitly. However, Dr. Greaves eventually nodded almost imperceptibly. He modified his strategy in accordance with Angela's recommendation. It became evident that her intervention had likely saved the patient's life as they continued the operation. Angela could sense the weight of numerous eyes on her as the surgery successfully concluded. Some individuals regarded her with a newfound respect, while others, such as Dr. Greaves, appeared to be raging with scarcely contained rage. Dr. Greaves turned to Angela as they began to clear up, his voice low and menacing. "Nurse Parker, I require a private appointment with you." Without delay, Angela's pulse was pounding as she followed Dr. Greaves out of the operating room. She was aware that speaking up had been the appropriate course of action. However, she also recognized that it could have resulted in her termination. Angela was taken aback when she discovered that the private chamber they entered was Mr. Edwards's. She had overlooked the fact that he was still a patient in the hospital as she concentrated on the operation. Nevertheless, Dr. Greaves appeared to be too enraged to be concerned about their location. As soon as the door closed behind them, he turned toward Angela, his face flushed with rage. "How dare you question my judgment in that situation?" he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Are you aware of the individual with whom you are interacting? You are fortunate that I have not immediately terminated your employment due to your insubordination." Angela maintained her composure, while maintaining a firm tone in her voice. "Dr. Greaves, I was merely fulfilling my duties. What is your occupation?" Dr. Greaves interrupted, his voice rising. "Your responsibility is to adhere to directives, not to assume that you possess superior knowledge. This is precisely the reason why individuals such as yourself are not appropriate for a prestigious institution such as St. Mary. You are present due to a misguided attempt at diversity, rather than any genuine talent or knowledge." With each passing moment, Dr. Greaves' tirade became increasingly racist and hostile, and Angela was overcome by a combination of despair and fury. Everything she had endured, every slight and microaggression, seemed to diminish in comparison to this blatant display of prejudice. Dr. Greaves was interrupted mid-sentence by a voice that sliced through the room just as Angela was about to respond. Mr. Edwards spoke with a calm authority that neither of them had previously encountered, addressing Greaves. "I am under the impression that you have forgotten your location and the individual with whom you are conversing." Angela and Dr. Greaves were taken aback when they turned to observe Mr. Edwards sitting upright in his bed, the expression of controlled anger on his face. Mr. Edwards, Dr. Greaves' face paled as he recognized the severity of his error, and he sputtered, "I was unaware that you were awake. I regret any inconvenience this may have caused." Mr. Edwards responded, "I am fully awake, Dr. Greaves," his pupils narrowing. "I have been awake for an extended period of time, which has enabled me to witness the dishonorable treatment of Nurse Parker by you and other hospital personnel." Angela remained in a state of shock, unable to comprehend the information she was hearing. The room was abruptly enveloped by an aura of power and authority emanating from Mr. Edwards, the quiet, unassuming patient. Mr. Dr. Greaves began, his voice slightly quivering. "I assure you that there has been a misunderstanding, Edwards." Mr. Edwards abruptly interrupted him, asserting, "There has been no misunderstanding. I have observed a distinct pattern of discrimination and harassment during my time here, and it must be put to an end." Angela and Dr. Greaves both came to the realization that Mr. Edwards was much more than a VIP patient as he spoke. The manner in which he conducted himself and the authority in his voice made it evident that Mr. Edwards possessed substantial power. What is your name?" Dr. Greaves inquired, his previous arrogance having completely dissipated. Mr. Edwards smiled, but his expression was devoid of affection. "An individual who has the capacity to ensure or undermine the future of this hospital," he stated. "At present, Dr. Greaves, I am not feeling particularly inclined to lend my support to an organization that tolerates such flagrant racism and unprofessional conduct." Angela experienced a mixed array of emotions as the gravity of the situation dawned on her. Relief that someone had finally witnessed and acknowledged the treatment she had been enduring, anger at the injustice she had confronted, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps finally things might change. Unbeknownst to them, this confrontation was about to initiate a sequence of events that would fundamentally alter St. Mary's General Hospital, revealing long-concealed biases and necessitating a long-overdue reckoning. The full weight of Mr. Edwards' words sank in, and the tension in his room was palpable. Struggling to reclaim his composure, Dr. Greaves' face was ashen. Angela stood in silence, her mind disoriented from the abrupt change in circumstances. Mr. Edwards, who was now fully upright in his bed, fixated Dr. Greaves with a resolute gaze. "I believe it is time for us to engage in a candid conversation regarding the culture of this hospital, don't you?" A knock at the door interrupted Dr. Greaves' response. A nurse with an apprehensive expression entered the room.
"Dr. Greaves, you are being sought by the hospital administrator. This is a matter of urgency." Dr. Greaves appeared to be divided between Mr. Edwards and the nurse. Finally, he gave a stiff assent. "We will resume this conversation at a later time." "Nurse Parker, Mr. Edwards, you are temporarily dismissed." Angela was left alone with Mr. Edwards as Dr. Greaves hastened out of the room. Mr. Edwards finally spoke, his voice now gentler, as the silence between them extended, heavy with unspoken. "Nurse Parker, I believe it is time for me to provide a comprehensive introduction. I am the CEO of Healthcare United, one of the largest healthcare conglomerates in the country, and my name is Thomas Edwards." Angela's irises widened in astonishment. Healthcare United was a medical industry leader, distinguished by its resources and influence. Suddenly, Mr. Edwards's previous statements regarding his ability to influence the hospital's fate became entirely comprehensible. "Mr. Angela began. Edwards, I uncertain about what to say. I implore you to take a seat," Mr. Edwards requested, pointing to a chair that was situated adjacent to his bed. "I believe we have a plethora of topics to address in the upcoming hour." Mr. Edwards disclosed that his visit to St. Mary's was unexpected as a result of his skiing mishap. However, it had provided him with an understanding of the hospital's fundamental problems. Mr. Edwards stated, "I arrived here as a patient with the expectation of receiving high-quality medical care. Instead, I have observed a culture of unprofessionalism and discrimination that is in direct opposition to my values as a healthcare leader." He continued to elaborate on the subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination that Angela had encountered, as well as the microaggressions and the general toxic culture that appeared to pervade the hospital. Edwards expressed a mixture of determination and fury in his voice, stating, Your experience, Nurse Parker, is regrettably not singular. However, it is intolerable, and it must be terminated immediately. Angela experienced a sensation of relief as they conversed. She experienced a genuine sense of being seen and heard for the first time since her arrival at St. Mary's. When she recounted her experiences, Mr. Edwards listened attentively, his expression becoming increasingly grave with each revelation. "I appreciate your candor, Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards stated upon her conclusion. "I commend your fortitude in the presence of such adversity. However, it is time for systemic change, rather than relying solely on individual perseverance." Immediately thereafter, there was an additional knock on the door. The hospital administrator entered the room with a look of agitation. "Mr. Edwards," she stated, her voice slightly quivering, "I am aware that there has been some concern regarding our hospital's practices. I can guarantee that we are extremely concerned about these matters." Mr. Edwards raised his eyebrow. "Do you?" "I have come to the conclusion that the sole thing that is taken seriously in this environment is the preservation of a status quo that is both outmoded and discriminatory." It was evident that the administrator was unprepared for such forthright criticism, as evidenced by his pale complexion. "I am uncertain as to whether I comprehend the situation. We have implemented diversity initiatives." Mr. Edwards interrupted her, stating, "Initiatives are insufficient. You require a comprehensive transformation of your hospital's culture, and it must commence at the highest echelons." Mr. Edwards articulated his demands for change over the course of the subsequent hours. He demanded a comprehensive examination of the discriminatory practices at St. Mary's, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all personnel, and a revision of the hospital's recruiting and promotion procedures. In regard to Dr. Greaves, Mr. Edwards stated with a stern voice, "I anticipate that his conduct will be thoroughly examined. His conduct today was not only unprofessional, but also discriminatory and potentially detrimental to patient care." The administrator, upon acknowledging the severity of the situation, nodded in an apathetic manner. "Certainly, Mr. Edwards. We will commence the implementation of these modifications immediately." Mr. Edwards' true identity and the changes he was demanding were disseminated throughout the hospital as the day progressed. The atmosphere in the halls of St. Mary's was electrifying, a combination of dread, anticipation, and for some, hope. Angela was the focus of attention as she continued to comprehend the events that had transpired. She was approached by colleagues who had previously neglected or belittled her. Some offered awkward apologies, while others sought her advice on the forthcoming changes. Angela returned to Mr. Edwards' room for the final time as her shift concluded. She discovered him seated upright, appearing fatigued but content. He addressed her with a cordial smile. "Nurse Parker, I hope you do not object, but I have recommended you for a position on the recently established Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Your experiences and insights will be invaluable as we endeavor to transform St. Mary's." Angela experienced an intense surge of emotion, including a rekindled sense of purpose, optimism, and gratitude. She expressed her gratitude to Mr. Edwards, her voice infused with emotion. For all purposes, Mr. Edwards shook his head. "No, thank you, Nurse Parker. Your professionalism and courage in the presence of adversity have been truly inspiring. You have served as a reminder of the primary reason I entered the healthcare field, to make a positive impact on the lives of others." Angela could not help but sense that a new chapter was commencing as she exited the hospital that evening, not only for herself but also for St. Mary's as a whole. Angela's path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since she began her employment there, she felt authentic optimism regarding the future. She was unaware that the changes that were implemented that day would have a significant impact on the healthcare industry as a whole, not just St. Mary's. The tale of a nurse who was dedicated to her profession and a patient who was unexpectedly influential was about to serve as a catalyst for change on a scale that neither had anticipated. The days that followed at St. Mary's General Hospital were characterized by a frenzy of activity and emotion. The institution was rocked by the disclosure of Mr. Edwards' true identity and his demands for change. The hospital's once pristine facade had been fractured, revealing the deep-seated issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for an extended period. Angela arrived at the hospital early on Monday morning to discover a flurry of activity.
Reporters were clamoring for statements from anyone who was prepared to speak. As news vans were parked outside, the staff was huddled in small groups, whispering feverishly, and the atmosphere was tense. Dr. Greaves was being escorted to the administration offices by security as Angela made her way to the nurses' station. Before the doctor was led away, their eyes momentarily met, and Angela observed a combination of fear and anger in his expression. A voice cried out, "Angela!" Sarah, one of the nurses who had previously been cold toward her, approached her with an awkward expression, and she turned to see her. "I would like to express my apologies for the manner in which I have treated you. I was unaware that—" Angela accepted the apology with a bow, but she was uncertain about how to respond. Before she could respond, an announcement was broadcasted over the hospital's public address system. All staff members are obligated to attend an emergency meeting in the main auditorium in 30 minutes. Attendance is compulsory. The auditorium was at capacity when Angela arrived. She located a seat in the rear, acutely aware of the curious glances and murmurs that pursued her. She observed Mr. Edwards, who was now dressed in a sharp suit despite his arm casts, conversing calmly with the hospital administrator and several other official-looking individuals at the front of the room. Mr. Edwards proceeded to the podium as the room began to quiet. His presence demanded immediate attention, and the murmurs gradually dissipated into a tense silence. He initiated the conversation with a firm and authoritative tone. "Good morning. I am Thomas Edwards, the CEO of Healthcare United. For those who are unfamiliar with me, I have been a patient at St. Mary's for the past week, recuperating from a skiing accident. I have had the privilege of observing the daily operations and ethos of this hospital during this period." He paused, his eyes roving across the room. "The events that I observed were profoundly distressing. I observed a culture of unprofessional behavior, bias and discrimination that is not appropriate for contemporary healthcare." Throughout the audience, there was a low murmur. While some staff members shuffled uncomfortably in their seats, others nodded in agreement. Mr. Edwards proceeded, "I would like to clarify. The incidents I observed, particularly the treatment of Nurse Angela Parker, are not isolated incidents. These symptoms are indicative of a systemic issue that has persisted for an excessive amount of time." Angela perceived that all eyes in the room were directed toward her. She sat up with a more upright posture, addressing her companions with a quiet dignity. Mr. Edwards then proceeded to delineate the immediate modifications that would be implemented. These included a comprehensive examination of discriminatory practices, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, and a complete overhaul of the hospital's recruiting and promotion processes. Additionally, Mr. Edwards stated, his tone becoming more abrasive, individuals who are discovered to have engaged in discriminatory behavior will be subject to severe repercussions. This encompasses Dr. William Greaves, who has been suspended until a comprehensive investigation into his actions is completed. The announcement elicited an additional round of murmurs from the audience. Some of Dr. Greaves' steadfast supporters appeared to be in a state of astonishment and anger, while others appeared to be relieved, as Angela observed. Mr. Edwards continued, "I am aware that these modifications may be challenging for some of you. Change is inevitable. However, it is not solely about adhering to moral principles, it is about delivering the highest quality of care to our patients." As Mr. Edwards concluded his speech, he made one final announcement that sent a jolt through the room, indicating that a diverse, inclusive and respectful workplace leads to improved outcomes. "Finally, I would like to introduce you to the individual who will be spearheading numerous of these changes. Nurse Angela Parker has consented to assume the position of Chief Diversity Officer at St. Mary's. Her expertise and perspectives will be invaluable as we endeavor to transform this institution." The room was filled with applause, and Angela felt a combination of pride, nervousness and shock flood over her. She had not anticipated this announcement, as she had only previously discussed joining the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with Mr. Edwards. Upon Mr. Edwards's invitation to proceed to the front of the room, she observed a variety of emotions on the faces of her colleagues, including surprise, respect, and in certain instances, residual resentment. Angela paused at the podium, and exhaled deeply before addressing the audience. "I am grateful, Mr. Edwards. I would like to convey to all of you that I am not an adversary, but rather a colleague who is optimistic about the potential of St. Mary's and all of you in this room. The journey ahead will be challenging, but I am dedicated to collaborating with you to establish a hospital in which every staff member is appreciated and every patient receives the highest quality of care irrespective of their background." Angela could perceive the influence of her words as she spoke. While some staff members nodded in accord, others appeared contemplative. Even those who had previously expressed their animosity toward her appeared to be attentively hearing. Immediately following the meeting, Angela was enveloped by colleagues who extended their congratulations, apologies, and in certain instances, tentative olive branches. The hospital's ambiance had undergone a significant transformation. Although tension and ambiguity persisted, there was also a tangible sense of optimism and potential. Angela collaborated with Mr. Edwards and the hospital administration to initiate the implementation of the promised modifications. As the day progressed, Angela experienced a sense of genuine impact for the first time since her arrival at St. Mary's Size, and the work was both exhilarating and exhausting. Mr. Edwards was waiting for Angela near the exit that evening, as she prepared to depart the hospital. "Nurse Parker," he said with a cordial smile, "or should I say Chief Diversity Officer Parker, how are you doing?" Angela exhaled a weary chuckle. "Mr. Edwards, it has been an eventful day. I must admit that I am still in the process of absorbing everything." Mr. Edwards nodded in comprehension. "I am aware that this is a significant amount of information to process, but I want you to be aware that I have complete faith in your capacity to oversee these changes. Your resilience and integrity in the face of adversity are precisely what St. Mary's requires at this time." Mr. Edwards addressed Angela with a grave expression as they exited the hospital in unison. "You should be aware that the events taking place at St. Mary's are merely the beginning. I intend to implement comparable modifications at all of Healthcare United's facilities. Your narrative, Angela, has the capacity to ignite a revolution in the manner in which we address diversity and inclusion in the healthcare sector." Rather than experiencing a sense of encumbrance, Angela felt a sense of empowerment as the weight of the responsibility settled on her shoulders. "I am prepared for the challenge, Mr. Edwards. Together, we can effect genuine, enduring change." Angela couldn't help but contemplate the extent of the transformation that had occurred in a mere few days as they parted ways. She was once isolated and on the brink of giving up. However, she is now at the vanguard of a movement that has the potential to revolutionize the entire healthcare industry, not just St. Mary's Size. The path ahead would be difficult, replete with obstacles and resistance from those who are averse to change. However, Angela experienced a sudden surge of resolve as she gazed at the hospital. This was more than merely a job. It was a vocation, an opportunity to guarantee that no other healthcare professional would have to endure the same ordeal she had. Angela departed into the evening with a re-energized sense of purpose, prepared to confront any obstacles that may arise the following day. St. Mary's was undergoing a transformation, which began a new chapter in the struggle for healthcare equality and inclusion. Under Angela's stewardship as Chief Diversity Officer, St. Mary's General Hospital experienced a significant transformation in the months that followed Mr. Edwards' revelation. The once noxious culture began to transition toward inclusivity and respect as a result of Mr. Edwards' ongoing support. The mandatory diversity and inclusion training, which was initially met with resistance, progressively changed hearts and opened eyes. Dr. Greaves was terminated from his position after an exhaustive investigation which served as a clear indication that discriminatory conduct would not be tolerated. Angela became in high demand as a speaker at medical conferences and diversity seminars as the changes at St. Mary's acquired attention. She addressed a crowded auditorium at a national healthcare conference 1 year after Mr. Edwards' intervention. "A year ago," Angela began, "I was a nurse on the brink of giving up. Today I stand before you as living proof that change is possible, that one voice can make a difference." She recounted St. Mary's story of transformation, not only highlighting the victories, the lives touched, the minds changed and the culture shifted, but also acknowledging the challenges they had encountered. Mr. Edwards, who had now fully recovered from his injuries, approached Angela with a warm greeting following the conference. "Angela," he addressed her, "you have come a long way from the nurse I encountered a year ago." They deliberated on the advancements at St. Mary's and the subsequent consequences for the healthcare sector. Mr. Edwards disclosed that numerous institutions within the Healthcare United network had initiated comparable initiatives. Mr. Edwards stated, "You know, Angela, when I arrived at St. Mary's following my skiing accident, I could never have anticipated the journey it would initiate. You have not only revolutionized St. Mary's, but you have also reignited my own enthusiasm for this work." Angela contemplated her extraordinary voyage as she prepared to return to St. Mary's, from an isolated, frustrated nurse to a leader and change maker. She had come a long way. Angela experienced an unprecedented level of determination and optimism, despite the fact that the task was far from complete. Upon her return to St. Mary's, Angela was greeted by Sarah, a former frigid colleague, who has since become a steadfast ally. The hospital was alive with a new vitality, as staff members engaged in unprecedented levels of collaboration and communication. Angela paused in the main lobby in front of a new mural that depicted a collaborative effort among a variety of healthcare professionals. The plaque below reads, "Our commitment is to inclusion, our strength is diversity, and our calling is compassion." Angela beamed as she seated herself in her office, prepared to confront new obstacles. The transformation of St. Mary's was merely the commencement. She was prepared for the ongoing task of transforming hearts, minds, and entire systems, and she was dedicated to advocating for a healthcare system that was genuinely inclusive, one day at a time. What moment in Angela's journey resonated with you the most? Was it her determination in the face of discrimination, or was it possibly Mr. Edwards' unanticipated intervention? Please share your views in the comments section below. If you found the video to be enjoyable, please consider subscribing to my channel. I dedicate my heart to the creation of these uplifting stories for you, and your encouragement is the driving force behind my efforts. I am grateful for your presence on this voyage.